Hi, my name's Mike Mahan from SMA America Solar Academy. In the tech tip, we will cover configuring a Sunny Boy US inverter via file to enable grid support functionality. Starting in September 2017, certain California utilities require that PV inverters installed in their territory have several autonomous grid support functions enabled. Equipment listed to UL 1741SA is capable of meeting these requirements, but the specific functions must be enabled upon commissioning. Correctly enabling all the functions required for compliance is as simple as downloading a configuration file to the Sunny Boy US. Before beginning the commissioning process, verify that the firmware version on the inverter is at least 2.03.01R. This is visible at the bottom of the label on the shipping box and also on the serial number label on the included production test report inside the box. If the inverter is on, knock on the screen until the second screen appears. The firmware version is shown with the name Package. If the firmware needs to be updated, the most current version can be downloaded from www.sma-america.com. The firmware can be loaded onto the inverter either using a USB drive, loaded with the update file in a folder named Update, or directly through the inverter's self-hosted user interface. The configuration file that will be used for the commissioning is also found at the SMA-America website in the Download section of the Sunny Boy product page. Go to the Programming and Configuration tab and select the zip file for California Rule 21 settings. Extract the contents of the zip file. There are instructions for the process, a list of what the final values of the parameters should be, and the parameter file. The parameter file extension is .bck. Please note that there are 3 parameter files. For split-phase residential 240 volt, 120 volt, or 208 volt Y utility connections, the 120 volt file must be used. Only use the 240 volt file for 240 delta service, and only use the 208 volt file for 208 delta service. Finally, if the inverter has already been commissioned or has been operating for more than 10 hours, you will need a grid guard code to install the file. Please apply for a grid guard code through SMA Service. The form can be found in the Download section of the Sunny Boy product page under the Forms tab. Once completed and submitted, it can be several days until the code is delivered. It is not specific to a person or a device, so one code per company is all that is needed. Now we are ready to configure the inverter. Once the Sunny Boy has been correctly installed and powered on, it is ready for commissioning. Note that DC power to the inverter is required for parameter changes to be stored. Commissioning requires access to the inverter's self-hosted user interface, which is accessed through one of the inverter's communication channels. The Sunny Boy US ships standard with wired and wireless communications built in. Either method can be used to access the self-hosted user interface of the inverter. If utilizing the inverter's self-hosted Wi-Fi network, any device that can join a Wi-Fi network and run a web browser will work. However, ensure the device you plan to use can navigate to a file and select it. Currently, iOS devices do not support this feature. For access using the self-hosted Wi-Fi, the network name is SMA followed by the 10-digit serial number of the inverter. The password for this network is SMA12345, no spaces, for the first 10 operating hours or until the inverter is first commissioned. After that, the password becomes the device-specific password printed on the label on the connection unit and also on the back of the installation manual. Once the network has been successfully joined, then open a web browser and enter 192.168.12.3 in the address bar. If there is a security warning, proceed to the site. You will see the login screen of the user interface. Select the installer level user group, and if you have not yet selected one, choose a password for this group. Be aware that this password must be used as the plant password if registering with Sunny Portal later. In this video, we will access the user interface on a wired connection. With the inverter connected to the local area network, knock on the lid of the connection unit area to see the IP address assigned to the inverter. Open a web browser on a computer on the same local area network and enter that IP address in the browser address bar. When you click Enter, you should be taken to the login screen of the user interface. Select the installer user group and enter the corresponding password. If the device has not been commissioned, you will be asked how you wish to configure the inverter. You can choose to manually configure via a file, or using the installation assistant. If the firmware version is at least 2.03.01R, selecting configuration from a file allows you to select the BCK parameter file that will correctly set all of the parameters for California Rule 21 Phase 1 compliance. This is the same file from the zip folder that we will use later. However, if you have performed a firmware update or are logging into the user interface after commissioning, you will be at the home screen of the user interface. From this screen, choose the Device Configuration tab, and then the wheel icon under Settings. In the pop-up menu that appears, choose Adopting a Configuration from a File. Navigate to the location of the parameter file and select the correct file. Again, for residential split-phase 240-volt, 120-volt service, choose the 120-volt file. Once the process has started, the window will show the parameter values that are changing. Wait until Parameter Upload Complete appears at the bottom of the window. The inverter will restart after the parameter upload is complete. Wait for the inverter to resume operation. This may take a few minutes until the screen shows the green LED pulsing. It is now possible to download all of the parameters off of the inverter. Log into the inverter user interface, and under the Device Parameters tab, you select Export All Parameters at the top right. This file can be retained as proof that the required parameters have been correctly set. We hope you've enjoyed learning how to configure the Sunny Boy US for California Rule 21 Phase 1 settings. If you'd like to learn more, please visit the product page at www.sma-america.com. My name is Mike Mahan for SMA Solar Academy. Thanks for joining us.